The synopsis of a purer theology consists of 52 disputations. If you look at the structure of the synopsis, it starts with the question what theology, sacred theology, really is, and then immediately turns to the Bible, to the authority and necessity of Scripture, and after that to the canon of the 66 books of the Bible. It is a pity that we do not know too much about the practice of the disputation. In fact, disputing on theses is an old medieval tradition in academic learning. Next to dictating what the students had to learn in the minor classes, the more advanced students also had to defend their theses in front of their other students and sometimes even of the professors. At the academia after the Reformation, in Lutheran and Reformed contexts, this medieval practice, this scholastic practice, was copied. And that resulted, in this case, in 1625, in the publication of these 52 disputations. But for all the disputations, there once was a moment on which a student, under the presidency of one of the four authors or presiding professors, had to defend the content of the thesis. That probably also evokes the question who the author of the thesis was. The professor was responsible for the content, but the students might have had a minor role in phrasing them. We don't know for sure about the authorship of the disputations, and maybe that's even a modern problem anyway, a modern concept of authorship, because more important in that scholastic or orthodox context was the truth of the content of the theses, not the private opinion of the professor, leave alone of the student. It is interesting in the case of the Synopsis disputations that we do have a glimpse of what happened in the lecture hall or the great auditorium of Leiden University. Mostly we don't have anything and don't know anything about the viva of these disputations. But one of the law professors, named Everardus Bronkhorst, wrote a diary in the period that the series started. On the 6th of February, he writes, a theological collegium was instituted. Regarding the subject matter, 52 disputations have been proposed, so that in the space of 2 years, the whole body of theology will be covered. Apparently it was the idea to have a disputation every other week, 52 in 2 years. It didn't work. It took 4 years, 1620 to 24, to finish the whole series. When the second disputation was defended, the one on the authority of Scripture, Bronkhorst was present. And he also asked the student some questions. He writes in his diary, I suggested that the authority of Scripture depends on the Church, which I supported from the 3rd chapter of the first letter to Timothy, where the Church is called a pillar and support of the truth. We don't know if he really believed in this critical remark, which is more Roman Catholic than Reformed, the Church as a support and pillar of Scripture. Maybe it was just part of the game of responding to and opposing the theses that were brought up. But in any case, he writes about the debate that followed, I insisted so vigorously on my opinion that the presider could not give me a sufficiently proper answer, as most of the students can testify, for he stupidly explained the pillar as a kind of a table resting on a pillar. Imagine the poor student with this professor opposing the theses and not knowing what to answer, and then the presiding professor, in this case Antonius de Wale from Zeeland, Antonius Valleus, also feeling a little bit uneasy with the criticism of his colleague, answering that objection in an insufficient way, at least according to the diary of Bronkhorst. That's how it went. Students might have had anxious moments in their final defense of the disputation. A final defense, I say, because most of them became a pastor shortly after defending the disputation, at least in the case of the Synopsis. But how about that confusing table resting on a pillar? I didn't understand what it meant when I read that the first time. But when I looked into the marginal notes of the Dutch Statenvertaling of 1637, there you can find an explanation that resembles the remark by Valleus. Reflecting on that expression of the church as a pillar of the truth, the marginal annotation of this Dutch King James Version or Authorized Version says, "The Church of God is called a pillar of the truth because God in His church establishes the truth and through it openly declares it to others. As the magistrate has the custom of fastening its placards and laws to pillars or other strongholds, that they may be known to all." In other case, according to this marginal annotation, the pillar was a kind of billboard on which the truth was fixed and displayed for all people. The truth of the Bible does not rest on the church as a pillar, but it is only announced by the church. It was not convincing for Everardus Bronkhorst, and maybe it's not convincing today, but it does show something of the academic debate of the Reformed Church in that context, where students had to practice in explaining the Reformed position over against objections, even if they maybe did not resemble the personal opinion of the students and their professors.